I'm Tim Cummings, and this is A Steel Ship and 10 Iron Men. In August 1990, an international coalition led by the United States began preparations for war, and it involved the coordination and prepositioning of military forces that would be deployed in Operation Desert Storm. One warship in the buildup was USS Iwo Jima, LPH-2, a 30-year-old amphibious assault ship. In late October, the ship transmitted a maintenance request to the Navy's repair detachment in Bahrain, Ship Repair Unit SRU, for repairs in her propulsion plant before returning to the operational theater. An item added later, which did not have to be repaired before returning to sea, was main steam stop valve 2 MS7. Because failures in main steam systems pose great danger to the crew and proper operation is vital to a ship's mission, the Navy categorized them as having the highest level of essentiality, and to ensure maximum confidence, the strictest oversight, Level 1 control, was applied to maintenance and repairs. Such were the requirements for the simple work requested on 2 MS7. On the 25th of October, Iwo Jima arrived in Bahrain. A conference was held on the ship that included the SRU acting officer in charge and resident marine surveyor, representatives from fleet or Navy-wide units, and the ship's chief engineer. During the conference, the chief engineer, who knew 2MS7 was a Level 3 valve by design but Level 1 by application, stated the ship had no replacement parts for 2MS7. When the error of the ship's force originally describing 2MS7 as a globe instead of a gate valve had been realized, the surveyor knew his specification should be corrected, but he did not do so due to perceived time constraints and how the work on 2MS7 had been characterized as a Level 3 item due to ship's force never identifying it as Level 1. Moreover, even before the work had been awarded, a patchwork of vastly different interpretations emerged of who had the responsibility for quality assurance. On October 28th, a civilian employee of the shipyard contractor boarded the ship and began disassembling 2MS7. He was not expected to read the repair specification, but to take, quote, general repair guidance, end quote, from his foreman, who did have a copy of the specification, which SRU routinely issued in a simple form because of language barriers. The contractor foreman was confident in the pipe fitter's ability to work on Level 1 systems, even though neither one spoke the other's language. Not aware of the stringent material control on his work, the non-English speaking pipe fitter approached a crew member for new parts. The ship's force had not been instructed to not provide any parts for the work, so, despite the language barrier, he was shown the parts bin, from which he selected 4 bolts, 8 studs, and 20 3/4-inch nuts. Some of the nuts he chose were brass. Because those fasteners were covered with a manufacturer-applied black coating, at a glance they could be mistaken for the correct Grade 4 steel nuts. The pipefitter knew silver nuts in the bin were steel, but was unsure of the dark-colored ones. Closer examination by way of a scratch or magnetic test would have revealed their metal content. Brass nuts were not appropriate for use on any system exceeding 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Iwo Jima's propulsion plant operated in excess of 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Past the maximum rating of 400 degrees, the tensile strength of the copper and zinc alloy was lost. Without, quote, general repair guidance, end quote, from his foreman, he reassembled the valve, mixing 8 studs with 4 bolts. The valve should have been reassembled using only B-16 steel studs. Doing otherwise was a violation of good engineering practice. After the pipe fitter indicated to ship personnel he had finished the work, he disembarked Iwo Jima, and the next day the valve was reinsulated with lagging, covering it up again. The foreman had never looked at 2MS7, and now no one would be able to. In the early morning hours of October 30th, Iwo Jima prepared to get underway and proceed to her operating area. Between 0630 and 0720, valve 2MS7 was opened to supply steam to the generator that supplied electrical power to the vessel. The passage of superheated steam, at a searing 865 degrees Fahrenheit, pressurized the valve bonnet, and heated the bolts, studs, steel, and brass nuts. The brass nuts were coming under a strain for which they were never designed and were incapable of holding, and they rapidly softened. At 0754, the wheelhouse received the report from main control the plant was ready to answer all bells, and at 0756, Iwo Jima was underway, headed for her part in the largest military buildup since World War II. At 0811, main control requested permission to shut down number 2 boiler because of a steam leak, and the officer of the deck approved the request. 1 minute later, a major steam leak was reported to the bridge along with the request to sound general quarters. Seconds before the valve's failure, one sailor who had just entered the fire room saw 4 men on the upper level looking at the failing valve beneath them. Immediately, he was waved off by the main propulsion assistant. As he turned around and began exiting the space, he heard the loud bang of the valve bonnet explosively detaching. Instantly, the entire space within the fire room was overcome by 640 psi superheated steam. He was already on the ladder leading up, but because of being suddenly enveloped in extreme heat, he questioned if he would actually make it out alive. Because he had literally just set 1 foot in the fire room when the lieutenant motioned for him to leave, he escaped with no injuries and survived. The 4 men who were looking at 2MS-7 initially did not attempt to escape. Rather, they ran away from the exit toward the lower level to undertake casualty control measures, a disciplined, professional, and sacrificing move because the decision would unquestionably doom them. All 10 of the sailors standing watch that morning knew the procedures for a major steam leak stated personnel should attempt, as time permits, to locate and isolate a rupture and secure equipment, including boilers. Without hesitation, 3 of the men standing above 2MS-7 rushed farther into the apocalyptic space, but quickly realized there was nothing they could accomplish. Gravely injured in the few seconds that had passed since the release, they made their way to the fire room exit and ascended the ladder to the mess deck, where they were treated by other crew members until the medical staff arrived. The other sailor who had been above the valve climbed through the escape hatch and walked to sickbay. Despite their own fatal injuries, the 4 men who escaped pleaded to those who were caring for their injuries that those who hadn't escaped had to be helped. In time, these 4 men were transferred to the USNS Comfort, but all 4 of the men who escaped the fire room, these sailors who had responded courageously only to be immediately vanquished by the horror that had enveloped them, died near midnight on the hospital ship. Those remaining 6 sailors in the fireless inferno went about implementing procedures for controlling a major steam leak, but the hellish leak from 2MS-7 could not be isolated. 23 minutes after the explosion, 2 petty officers entered the menacing fire room to search for their shipmates. The heat had turned them back earlier, but what kept them going was their shared thought, a hope really, that someone had made it through. While approving their aggressive and courageous request, the chief engineer instructed them to assist anyone in the fire room as needed. Otherwise, they were told to identify the sailors still in the space. Once a space filled with engineering wonders, where man created and harnessed the energy that moved the vessel around the world, was now a furnace of devastation. Still exceptionally hazardous because of the incredible heat, the fire room presented a stunning landscape. Everything was white. The explosion obliterated insulation covering pipes, valves, and fittings and dusted everything within the space with fine particles. Working quickly for the sake of the 6 as well as themselves, the 2 sailors found the lifeless bodies of their shipmates. Where they found them told them the story. The delay of all 10 and the inability of the 6 who never escaped was due to their attempts to shut down the steam plant and save their ship. Snipes to the end. explosion on Iwo Jima rumbled through the entire non-nuclear surface fleet. The Judge Advocate General and Naval Investigative Service investigations determined that missteps in the required quality assurance procedures were not isolated to SRU or USS Iwo Jima. Concurrent with the investigations, a significant fleet-wide review was undertaken, and it was discovered a vast number of ships were not consistently embracing required quality assurance processes. In response to the major engineering casualty, quality assurance manuals were simplified and QA responsibilities of ship personnel clarified throughout the fleet. Pocket-sized guides to QA were provided for every sailor, and proper training and program reviews were instituted along with increased attention to QA by the leadership of the Navy's surface fleets. The direct cause of the accident was the improper use of black-coated brass nuts. The potential for an engineering casualty anywhere in the fleet was identified by the Navy in 1975, but because an all-out purge never took place, they remained an inventory item in 1990. The court called for the removal of all such fasteners, fully and finally rectifying the problem that was first acknowledged 15 years earlier. After the accident, Iwo Jima spent 6 weeks in port for repairs before getting underway and serving in Operation Desert Storm. In 1992, she participated in the humanitarian mission Operation Provide Promise as a search and rescue resource in the Adriatic Sea for aircraft delivering aid supplies to Sarajevo. In 1993, weeks short of 32 years of active service, the USS Iwo Jima, LPH-2, the first vessel built from the keel up to deliver both air and ground forces, was decommissioned and cut up for scrap 3 years later.